Hello everyone, in this set of videos we're going to be talking about the ways that we display data and interpret data that's displayed. So really we're talking about data graphs, data plots. Now in thinking about data, it's good to remember there are two types of data. We first have categorical data, that's things like race, gender, favorite color, data that's reported as a word. When we represent it, we usually somehow say this is how often it occurs. We also have numerical data. Numerical data is reported as a number. It's something that's a number we measure. It's height, weight, shoe size, income, and we can do more interesting things with this data. So let's talk first about displaying categorical data. We use real graphs, pictographs, bar graphs, and pie graphs, and we're going to look at each of these. I hate pie graphs, by the way, and I'll explain why. So here's a real graph. In a real graph, we give students some sort of real object and have them stack them to compare them or line them up like this. This works well with beads, M&Ms, Skittles. It works best if the items we're comparing are the same size. You may have seen something in a preview activity where they tried to do a real graph with objects that weren't the same size and that distorted the picture. So next we have pictographs. Pictographs are often where we take the real graphs and just put them on paper with symbols. So one thing to note again is that all of these objects here are the same size. It doesn't make sense to use a pictograph if the objects aren't the same size as you saw in the preview activity. Now, sometimes with a pictograph, we use an object to represent something other than one thing. So notice here we have a key telling us that each thing here represents 1 million people. So I lived in Wyoming for a while, and Wyoming has about 500,000 people. Idaho has 1.5 million, and so on and so forth. So sometimes when we use these objects, it helps us show part of an object and show more than we maybe would be able to otherwise. Next, we have our bar graph. Now, in reality, a bar graph is just a pictograph with the pictures glued together. And it can be horizontal or vertical. So you'll see these horizontal ones a lot. One thing I really like about bar graphs is it's a little bit easier to get exact data, and they look a little more professional than a pictograph. Rarely am I going to use a pictograph in like a business presentation. I'd rather use a bar graph as it's a little more clear what is what. We also have the very fun double bar graph. I got this data from some real data I found online where we use a double bar graph to compare who experiences stage fright. So notice here in the left-hand set of bars, these are people who said no to stage fright. The red people are people who are considered as extroverts. The orange as introverts, as you might imagine. Extroverts report not having stage fright a lot more, whereas introverts report having a lot more stage fright. Next, we have the pie graph. Pie graphs are my least favorite graph. Now, they're used to represent data that are distinct percentages of the same whole. In other words, this category does not overlap at all with the other category. And the percentages must add up to 100%. So let me show you why I don't like pie graphs. These are two real pie graphs I found online. Here on the right, we have one from the 2012 election. That's a while back, but notice these percentages are not distinct. and they definitely don't add up to 100%. Additionally, we have a pie graph here where it is evenly divided, but who can read this? This is just a mess. Now, there are other ways that people do pie graphs that are bad. And here's the other type of bad pie graph, and that's a 3D pie graph. Why? Because perspective can skew things. So it looks here that the yellow and the red are maybe about the same size, and red might be bigger than blue and teal, but maybe they're about the same. But when I put the numbers in, red and blue are not the same, and yellow's definitely not the biggest, even though it looks like it. So 3D pie graphs are terrible, but they're used all the time because they look fancy. One final word about pie graphs. The best way to deal with a pie graph is just to turn it into a bar graph. There are few pie graphs that are not made better by being a bar graph. So in general, pie graphs aren't terrible, but bar graphs often make more sense. With that, we're now going to move on to numerical data.